We've spent a lot of time on this channel studying some pretty grim stuff. Cosmic horror, the loss of identity, the fragility of mortal life. I love exploring that side of fiction, but after a while it sort of starts to wear on the psyche a bit. So I want to take a small step back from it with Edgar Allan Poe. I know, not typically the person you turn to for hope and light, but he did write two stories that shocked me with their optimism. Both of them are about death and mesmerism, spirituality and the afterlife, individuality and the cosmos. And they're not even really that dark. Okay, well, one of them is, but the other is actually almost the opposite of some of the grimmer stuff we've been studying. So prepare for a little journey out of darkness. I want to show you how Edgar Allan Poe, of all people, refuted cosmic horror and offered up a surprisingly beautiful alternative. A big thanks to Skillshare for helping to make this video happen, but an even bigger thanks to all of our Patreon supporters who literally helped make this video. The part of the show you don't see is how our patrons join us for live research sessions to figure all of this out. And the ideas they share really do sculpt these videos. A big shout out to one patron in particular, Rumpelstiltskin, suggesting we research pantheism was an amazing idea for this video. Thank you so much. I guess you could loosely call the two stories I want to share with you here ghost stories, but they're honestly a whole lot weirder than that. They're also sort of science fiction, and they're hoaxes as well, written as though they actually happened. So bear that in mind as we begin. Let's start with the darker of the two, the facts in the case of M. Valdemar. The narrator of our story is a mesmerist who's been running experiments with the pseudoscience for some time to varying degrees of success. But he'd always harbored one great curiosity about his work. What would happen if you were to mesmerize someone as they died? Lucky for him, one of his regular patients turns out to be terminally ill. Enthusiastically, the patient, one M. Valdemar, accepts the proposal to run the experiment. So the man's time of death is projected as precisely as possible, and when that time approaches, the narrator gathers together with the dying man and several other doctors, as well as a witness. Finally, at Valdemar's urging, they commence the trance. All seems fairly normal, patient answering whatever questions are put to him in his dreamlike state, reporting on his condition. But then, as the body starts to give out and he slowly expires, he somehow continues to report on his condition, saying eventually that he is dying, and then, finally, that he is dead. Eerily, the voice no longer seems to be emanating from his mouth, but from someplace far away. Not knowing what else to do, the narrator and company leave the patient in this mesmerized state of undeath for a period of 7 months, checking in daily. The whole time, he appears to be pale, without a pulse, no perceptible breathing, cold to the touch, clearly dead, but not decaying, not advancing beyond that state. Eventually, they decide that they have to try waking him. Perhaps they had arrested death after all. Perhaps he would still be alive. And if not, at least he would finally be able to pass on. But as the narrator brings his patient out of the trance, the voice returns. This time, it is not so calm. This time, it is screaming, pleading for him to stop dallying and make a decision. For God's sake, it says, quick, put me to sleep, or quick, waken me, quick. I say to you that I am dead. Hearing this, the narrator rapidly brings Valdemar out of the trance, only for the 7 months postponed death to catch up with him then and there. His body erodes and liquefies almost instantaneously into what the narrator describes as a loathsome mass of detestable putrescence. And that is where the account ends. You might already be thinking, hey, what happened to that optimism you were promising? That's a pretty unsettling story. Well, it's coming, I promise. This is actually the second of the two stories Poe wrote about this idea, and far away the darker of the pair. You'll get it after I explain the other one, trust me. It's called Mesmeric Revelation, and it's unlike almost anything else I've ever read. It's barely a story at all, if I'm being honest. The basic concept is pretty much the same. A person is mesmerized at his time of death, and strangeness ensues. Where these two stories differ is their tones and the results of this bizarre setup. This time, instead of the narrator approaching his terminally ill patient about the experiment, The patient, one M. Vankirk, proposes it himself, saying that whenever the narrator has mesmerized him in the past, he's always experienced a deep, almost transformative clarity about the nature of his own mortality. But, alas, he could never quite grasp the revelations teasing at the edge of his vision. Maybe this time, so close to crossing the veil of death, he finally will? Of course, the narrator agrees to the experiment and entrances Vankirk one last time. Soon the two of them are in a long and rambling conversation, the patient speaking as if from a different mouth altogether, a higher authority. He's more lucid, more articulate than ever, and the things he says are profound. They discuss everything from the nature of mortality to the presence of God in all things. And this is why I say Mesmeric Revelation is barely a story. The majority of it seems to be Poe using these characters to explore some interesting philosophies about the metaphysical. The mesmerized Vankirk waxes scholarly about the way that human sensory organs narrow the ability to perceive the cosmos and how people are individuals in life but join back together into one divine consciousness afterward, for instance. I'll talk more about the ideas in this story soon, but suffice it to say for now that this guy is a smidge more involved than Valdemar. But eventually, Vankirk's body can hold out no longer, and perceiving this difficulty in his patient's face, the narrator decides to wake him up from the trance immediately. He's surprised to find that the man is already dead, head motionless on the pillow with a radiant grin across his features. In fact, he seems to have been dead for some time, forcing the narrator to wonder whether his patient had been, quote, addressing him from out of the region of shadows. That's a lot, isn't it? I certainly thought so the first time I read it. 1 part pseudo-sci-fi, 1 part dark romance, 15 parts existential diatribe about our place in the cosmos. It took me a long time to realize how beautiful this story actually is. And through this story, I was even able to read Valdemar again and see the glimmer of beauty beneath the loathsome mass of detestable putrescence. I think part of my initial confusion reading these stories came from the fact that they seem to be about the spectacle of mesmerism. Certainly Valdemar reads that way, and Mesmeric Revelation is so dense it's sort of hard to know what it's about. When Poe first published them, they were picked up by newspapers, organizations, and individuals who all wanted to use them as case studies for their belief in the pseudoscience. Either they disregarded that they were written as hoaxes, or didn't know. Some even claim to have replicated the experiments in these stories to great success, which, wow, kind of embarrassing given Poe outed himself as having written these as hoaxes. He made it very clear from the start that he only ever intended for them to be taken that way. "Some few persons believe it, but I do not, and don't you," he wrote to one inquirer. Like so much of the best science fiction, the scientific marvel isn't what makes these stories resonate. It's what the science means for the people it touches, for their perception of themselves and the world around them. As a practice, mesmerism was all about a principle called animal magnetism, which suggested that the cosmos is suffused with a magnetic fluid, flowing invisibly through all things. Thus, it makes an unseen point of connection between all people so that one person can exert an influence over another and lull them into a sort of mesmeric trance or crisis. In this projected state, the entranced individual would supposedly acquire a clearer vision of reality, unclouded by the rudiments of sensory organs. As one source puts it, all opacity is removed and every object becomes luminous and transparent. After reading Mesmeric Revelation and a bunch of other post-sci-fi to boot, that man has a weird catalog, I can't help but feel he saw something greater in this. Through the principles of mesmerism, the story explores a version of reality where there is no division between the spiritual and the material. The magnetic fluid is described in the story simply as a level at which matter becomes so fine it's no longer particulate or even atomic. It all coalesces into one ultimate substance, one combined thing. Thus, the mesmerized Vankirk reasons, all is technically one. Living things are only separated from the rest of the universe by their consciousness while they're alive. That narrowing of perception that results from sensory organs and physical limitation. Your meat brain can't fathom it all, your eyes can't see, which is why mesmerism provides such clarity. And finally, all of this means that death itself is simply, quote, the painful metamorphosis, the worm once again becoming the butterfly. To put all of that very simply and more in line with the verbiage of the story, according to this story, everyone and everything together is God. What Poe found in mesmerism wasn't just a flashy new pseudoscience to speculate at. He found philosophies about the universe. What he found was pantheism and materialism. Materialism in that this practice reduces the spirit to a substance, that magnetic fluid, which allows all things to be connected, no longer separated as physical and metaphysical. And he found pantheism in that, according to the story, this material unity of all things is the divine. Now, I don't personally have very strong feelings about any one existential philosophy or another, but I feel about this the way that I feel about cosmic horror. If we can ask whether we are isolated and alone in a cruel and indifferent cosmos, can't we also ask whether we are the cosmos? If we can write fiction about cosmic entities who cradle reality in their hands, can't we also write fiction about us, cradling it in our own? The cosmos is vast, and we as individuals are small. This is true. How we react to that is up to us. It doesn't have to be a source of fear and nihilism, and fiction is the place where reality becomes what we want it to, so why not explore this hopeful concept just as thoroughly? There is beauty in this vision of the universe and ideas here to find. Poe knew it, and look at all the strange things he was able to create as a result. I hope you'll share what you come up with in the comments. And then, when you go on to create something from these ideas, I hope you'll share that with us as well. If you manage to create anything at all. It's one thing to feel inspired, but it's another thing entirely to turn that inspiration into a creation. Unfortunately, I don't have the time in this video to walk you through that process, but I do know someone who does. I recently found a 14-part video series called Creative Writing Bootcamp, and it gives you so much to start with if you're a new writer. There are things in here I wish I'd been told by someone 10 years ago. Things like where ideas come from, how to relate to your characters, how to write conversations, settings, even how to go against the common wisdom and write something you don't know. The series was put together by best-selling author Mila Goldberg, and her enthusiasm and joy as she teaches is absolutely contagious. You will end the series ready to write something. And thanks to our sponsor Skillshare, you can actually watch it for free. This is what Skillshare is all about, after all, providing a platform for creatives to stand up and share their skills with the community. And the community there is big. People have created classes on creative writing, illustration, fine art, animation, graphic design, video, and film. For just about any creative field you can think of, experts have stepped up to share their knowledge on Skillshare. You can even join in on live classes, connecting with other creators and teachers while you learn. After talking to them about it, it seems like the people over at Skillshare can see why we're so excited about that creative writing bootcamp class we mentioned earlier, so they've decided to give you the opportunity to experience it and any other Skillshare class that catches your interest for free. Until the end of September, the first 1,000 Tale Foundry fans who join the Skillshare community will get not just the usual 15-day trial for free, but a full 30-day trial. An entire month of free learning and expert guidance on all the creative things you ever wanted to do. Click the link in the description or the link at the end of the video to get started. And I would definitely hurry because those slots are going to fill up fast. Oh, and hey, please, once you've watched through Mila Goldberg's Creative Writing Bootcamp, share, come back and tell us the impact it's had on you as a writer. We love to hear those kinds of success stories. There is nothing better than seeing creative people find their wings. And that's it for this video. There's usually a few weeks between uploads, so if you want more Tale Foundry in the meantime, come join our community. We have a Discord server that's basically like a big family of creatives, a lot of love there. We also run writing groups on Twitch every single week if you want to get some practice in. You can find links to all of it in the description. Hope to see you there. Until then, thanks for watching and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next time. Bye!